Right. Welcome to Insight Tonight. And our guest tonight is no stranger to our set. She's been here before and she served us quite a lot of insight. We thought it was so good we needed to do it again. Karibu sana, Josephine. Karibu sana. We have Josephine Mwawira. Let me tell you something. You wear so many hats, but they're all around the same kind of sphere.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And I believe by now Kenyans should know. You know? But now that you're here, and I know I told them a little bit earlier on that we're going to be talking about the circular economy.
Yeah.
I think it would be useful because the last time you came, you dropped that word,
yeah.
and we actually had some questions. What is this circular economy? What does this mean? Does the money come from one pocket to the other? What does this mean? So if you were to break it down just as simply as you can, what is a circular economy?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me again.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely.
And I think today we'll try and make it as simple as possible, but also giving some important updates that have happened now that we are coming
between
to the
now
end
and then. Oh, yes.
of 2013 with some major events that have happened, including COP28.
Yes.
But to answer your question,
yes, please.
Circular economy is a groundbreaking concept. It challenges the current or the traditional take-make waste model. We call it the linear model. So if you consider a straight line, we take resources, natural resources,
like raw materials.
raw materials, and then we make or produce consumables. We use the products that we make out of that, and then we irresponsibly waste, or we irresponsibly dispose them off.
Whatever the rest.
The
waste from the production or the actual
and most
things
of
after
that,
we're done with them?
Most of things when we're done with them. But unfortunately, most of these products are made for single use. Meaning we only use them once. Often, and then we dispose of them off. Now they end up often in the environment, in the landfills, in the oceans, in the waters. Now we take some in the fields with the crops where we grow. And this is one of the things that has led also to the triple planetary crisis of, I don't know whether you know it, biodiversity loss, climate change and pollution. And now circular economy proposes a new model.
So hold on. Let's go
Take a step back. All right.
So this linear system is how we've been running our lives.
Yeah, for the longest time.
But we can't keep doing that.
We cannot. We can't afford to keep
We're destroying
doing it now.
our biodiversity.
Exactly.
Climate change is happening. Global warming and all that. We're experiencing floods and famines and so on. And then we also have pollution. Do you think, in your opinion, the world is catching up to the impact of our own actions?
Yeah.
Do you think we're connecting the dots?
We are connecting the dots, and if you think about it, if you've heard of the terminologies climate adaptation, climate resilience, climate mitigation, it means that climate change has already caught up with us because we cannot adapt if we can't beat it, if we have already beat it. That means we now have to find ways of either adapting to it, even as we mitigate, or becoming resilient.
More resilient.
It's like you consider what happened with COVID. It was here. We couldn't ignore it anymore. So the best thing we could is to try to develop a health system that will help us become resilient and more stronger to beat it. Then mitigate by using all those protection measures, wash your hands and everything. And then we had to take the injection to help our bodies to adapt, you understand? So the first fact I mentioned is that it was already here.
It's already here with us.
Couldn't ignore
Can't ignore it.
It's the same now with climate change. We cannot ignore the fact that the effects are already here and they are devastating.
Even the people, the deniers, the people in denial now have nowhere to hide.
It's devastating. How many people denied that El Nino would show up? Finally. Some made fun and said, well, it has, it's care of the taxes and everything.
Yes, indeed.
We have communities that have suffered great loss, not to mention the loss of life, but also loss of livelihoods, loss of crops and everything. And these are some of the effects and the impacts of climate change. It's as simple as that.
Simple as that. Now, with I suppose to get people out of a cycle, there's got to be something that disrupts that cycle. And this cycle we're talking about is a linear way of doing things, the linear economy, so to speak. So in comes circular economy, which, using your own words, is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Now, this is where we are saying we have to rethink how we interact and thrive together with nature. And so we have to create a closed loop where we reduce what we extract as natural materials, because remember, when you keep taking and you don't replenish, eventually it's going to get finished. You don't have any more. And so when you take and then you make, at the making process, where we call the production process, we must rethink how we design products so that, one, we design them for longevity, so that they serve us for a longer time. And then we create them in a way that they can be reused for a longer time, they can be repurposed, they can be refurbished, repaired, and eventually they can be recycled. So when you're producing, even in the elements and the additives that you put, how you design your products, whether it's the plastic bottles you reduce from designing them and producing them as colored PET bottles to clear bottles, or the HDPEs, you remove the additives, or even if we are talking about textiles, your clothes, the clothes you wear, you realize some clothes you wear and then you wear once they are torn. Right. So we have to rethink how we design and create things so that they serve us for a longer time. And then we implement all those R's, eventually the materials can go back to the production process instead of going to the environment.
Oh, so hence
waste.
The circular nature.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of a product that can be, produced currently, maybe majority of the time being produced in a linear way and very wasteful way, that can be done in a circular way and to greater advantage? Can you give us an example, please? The
examples are everywhere. Okay. When you think about it, first of all, we have to understand that circular economy is cross-cutting. So you can't find that in one sector only or in one industry only. It has to be across all the economies, right? So even if you talk about food, we talk about regenerative agriculture, circular agriculture. And we are saying when you're producing your food, even the chemicals and the manure you use, you can do it in a regenerative way. So that we used to grow food with manure direct from the cows. We didn't have to use chemicals for that in the olden days. But now what has happened is that we have brought in so many additives into the inputs we put in agriculture, that now it affects the whole ecosystem, including our health, right? So if we look at it, again, if we look at, even if it's plastics, what I mentioned, you can think of how you design so that that plastic is not used once and then disposed of. It can be recycled or reused. Right. And then remember, one of the most important things is that we have to rethink what we don't need. To become resource efficient, you have to think, must I use, do you order food online, for instance?
Yeah, every now and then.
Often you order it at home. You have plenty of spoons at home. And then your package comes with cutlery, there is plastics and forks. Most often you don't even use them. You just pick and throw in your dustbin.
Right.
That's not even single use. It's zero use. Zero use.
It's going into the dustbin unused.
And then it goes, if it's not properly managed, where? Into the landfill. So what must you not use, especially the single-use ones? I remember a song when I was growing up that was called, I don't know whether you know it, My Coat of Many Colors. Yes. The picture that I had, it had a lot of patches of different repairs.
Colors, different textures and different materials.
And at that time, the idea was that that person was poor.
Yes.
But look at the high-end fashion right now on runways. What are they showing us?
That.
It's the same. So before you throw away a cloth that you've not used in a long time, could you first consider repairing?
Right.
Yeah. If not, could you repurposing it,
Yes.
or you can give it to someone who, if it's small, can fit them, because we grow, we increase in size,
Yes.
we have to adjust, but somebody else might need it.
Yeah.
So circular economy, when you look at it in the simplest of terms, without complicating the language, are the things that we use and we do to make sure that we become efficient in everything we do, and especially in using resources.
Josephine, I have a question at this point.
Yep.
What's stopping us from doing this across all industries? And even at home, what's stopping us from doing this? Because, I mean, it's a win-win situation for everybody. Win for the environment, win for ourselves, because some of the processes you're describing actually sound very economical, you know, and win for industry, win for everything. So why are we not doing it as much? What's the stumbling block?
I would say several things. One of them being awareness. I find that a lot of us still lack in terms of awareness and education in what this exactly means for us and the impact that it would have for us and our generations to come, and the biodiversity where we live, our health, our entire livelihood and our well-being when we take certain actions instead of others, right? For businesses, when you're talking to businesses and helping them to transition to circular and sustainable models, we say when, for instance, you invest, because it has to start with investment at some point. When you invest in models where, for instance, you install solar panels, eventually you might feel like, where do I have to get all this money from? But when you do the calculations at the end of your annual turnover, you will see the change. It doesn't have to start from year one, but over time, you realize that you become resilient even in things that happen like COVID-19. Some businesses had to close, but those that had already prepared were able to thrive.
Right.
When you have to think, for instance, when you know that there's going to be rains and my business is somewhere that can be affected because there could be flooding, how do you prepare in a way that your business does not end up closing? Are you able to move? Yeah. If there's going to be power outages because of the rains, am I able to still operate because I have backup?
Right.
You understand? So we can talk of big businesses and big steps, but it goes down even to the small MSMEs. How are they able to adapt to the changes? Like we say, there's adaptation and the resilience. So one of the other things that maybe is making us not to go forward is also the policy implementation. We have all these documents in place. We have legal and law and regulations that tell us, this is the right direction that we should take because these are very well explained documents. But when it comes to implementation, do we always have to wait until we have to use the stick when you can already start with the carrot?
The carrot, yes indeed.
Yeah.
Right. So now, I'm sure somebody is listening to us and is wondering, okay, I like what this brilliant lady is saying. I hear all these points. I hear it. Okay. Now, if you were to help somebody create a roadmap to where we're going, where we'd like to go, a place where the circular economy is a way of life rather than a unique novelty somewhere. What are the key things that you feel, one of them you said is awareness, what other things do you feel that can be done to make sure that we mainstream this kind of thinking, this kind of philosophy, and from the grassroots all the way till the big business and big government? What are some of those things you'd recommend?
There could be several, but I think I might focus on two.
Please.
Number one is innovation. And Kenya and Africa, we are a hotbed of brilliant minds that come up with ideas.
Yes.
And over time, when an idea comes up, when people make that their way of life, it becomes what they do. Look at M-Pesa when it came.
Yes,
it
was quite disruptive.
Yeah, it was very disruptive, and a small percentage had that ability to
uptake
transact
initially.
in the uptake. But what about now? Even the
everywhere.
grandma.
You can't even live without it.
Exactly, like you can't survive. And then COVID came,
Right.
and then you realize that we went cashless. What if we didn't have the
M-Pesa at that
M-Pesa?
time.
Yeah?
Right.
How many people would have been locked out of financial transactions because they didn't have access to bank accounts and everything? So Africa, we have very brilliant minds. And circular economy has to shift because of the innovations we put in place. When I talk about redesigning, for instance, it comes with thinking how, what materials do we use, what innovations, how technology is going to come and play in place. When it's about recycling, there's also innovation. How do the machines and the technology impact that? So we have to invest in innovations, and we have to allow the young people to bring their brilliant minds to the table. And that brings me to the second point of collaboration. We can't have one group of people making decisions when we have solutions across the board. So when the government sits down, it has to involve the private sector, because that's where the innovations come from.
True.
The young people, the youth, must be on the table because they also have brilliant solutions. But also indigenous communities, because most of these solutions that we think are and overthink them, they're already existing in these communities.
Exactly.
And they are already working. So we just need to tap into that indigenous knowledge. So collaboration is very important. Partnerships from local to national to international levels between development partners like UNEP and IUCN. And at COP28, one of the key outcomes that has come up is the phasing out of fossil fuels.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
It's big, it's huge.
That's actually, that was going to be my next question. This has been a huge year in terms of conferences where certain, to a degree, key issues concerning our planet, and particularly from the point of view of our continent, have been discussed, and some key takeaways there. I wanted to find out for you, what have been the key takeaways and why are they significant from where you sit?
I think that is one. Okay, the main.
And by the way, today the fuel prices went down. So we're expecting a lot more people to start using petrol. We've seen the usage go down. It kind of is counterintuitive when you think about it with what you're saying. But please, what are your main takeaways from this year's events?
Let me focus on that and say three things. Okay. One, that decision is based on science, all right? They said we are facing this on science because we don't have an option. And then the leaders in the global south are saying our development as a continent is majorly based on fossil fuels.
True.
So the global north has to keep their commitment of $100 billion a year to Africa or to the developing continents to be able to keep up, yeah? That is what they're calling, or we're calling, the just transition. So as we transition to phasing out the fossil fuels, then we have to make sure that the development of the developing countries is not at that cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's a major concern for a lot of people.
It is a major concern for a lot of people.
Telling us to stop this, but this is what we need to get out of poor country status to something else.
Yes. But I listened to one of the speakers, the head of nature-based solutions at IUCN, called Charles Karangwa, and he said, complementing the phasing out of fossil fuels with nature-based solutions is one of the best frameworks for nature and people and climate to coexist.
Tell me why that struck you.
That struck me because, number one, IUCN defines nature-based solutions as actions that address societal changes. Number one, by protecting the biodiversity that we already have.
Right.
Number
and by
two,
the way, IUCN is in charge of, sorry to interrupt, is in charge of, if you've ever heard of this animal is endangered, this one is least endangered, this one is, all those classifications, that's part of IUCN's job. They help protect some species that would otherwise have been rendered
extinct. Yeah.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And then number two, sustainably managing the ecosystems that we already have and those that we will create. And number three, restoration of damaged biodiversity or what we have already lost. So those three will help us to make sure that the benefits are both for the biodiversity and for the well-being of humans. Yeah. So we have to find a way where we coexist, and not just coexisting, but thrive between humanity and nature. Because I want to support, and this answers your question, why this struck me, is because I believe when I talked about collaboration, one thing or one person or one very important player that is always left out is nature.
It's true.
We must and we cannot afford to continue not having a seat on the table for nature. As long as we are making decisions regarding the survival of human being and the survival of our planet and the future generations, then when you and the government and the private sector and the youth are sitting around this table, then here we should have a seat for nature. Because we must consider what are the nature-based solutions that we can tap into and responsibly use them to replenish what is already lost.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, I want you to talk to people, the people who are listening to you, the young environmentalists, the people who are inspired by what you're saying, or the people who are watching what's happening around their world and they're concerned and they want to do something about it. There's a sense in which, and this thing came up even in the Africa Climate Summit that we had, and even in COP28 and a few other things, there's a sense in which the regular mwananchi feels like all these concepts are too big, too important, too complicated for me. I wonder what I can do to be able to contribute to this process. What would you tell such a person?
We all have a responsibility. It doesn't matter how small you feel you are or how big you think you are. We have a responsibility. And if the big person feels that they cannot do it because they're too important, and if the small person feels I am too minor to contribute, then who will? Yeah? So we have to start thinking about us first. So every mwananchi, even when the government comes and says this is the law, we have to, producers must now, under the EPR, what you call the extended producer responsibility, have to make sure that their products do not end up in the environment, and now the PROs are responsible for making sure there's collection and all that. Then me as a citizen, now thinking as a citizen, I ask, how can I contribute? Number one, I went back to my village recently, and you know that this green and everything. There's a point I stood and there's all these plastic bags, the paper bags, littered all over. And it hurt my hand. I almost came over and collected, but I thought, even where I am right now, if I can just make sure that my vicinity is healthy enough, and not just in terms of litter, but also in terms of what I said, restoring the biodiversity around where I am. We talk of the ambitious need of growing trees, and note that I didn't say plant, I said grow trees. So make sure that when you plant a tree, there's a difference there. So when you plant 10 trees, the likelihood is that maybe 5 or 6 or 4 might die for one reason or another. It's a crop, But then following up on it, making sure you weed out, making sure you water it and see it grow. For those that don't survive, make sure that you plant others. So sometimes we think, my contribution is too tiny and too minor, but guess what? If you do your small thing, and I do my small thing, and then our neighbor does the small thing, before we know it, we have a big forest. And a big forest in this term, I mean not just the forest of trees, but also a forest of efforts from across everything that we do to production, because now, like I said, we have to think, your generation to come, is it going to blame you for what you did or you didn't do? So even as leaders come up with agreements across the globe at COP28, now we are going to the holidays. When we come, what does this mean for us when we are starting it in 2024? Let us have actions, all right? When we have laws and regulations, let us implement. Let us take it as a personal responsibility, because then the nature and the future of this planet is all dependent on us. And remember, right now, we have no guarantee of another place that we can run to.
This is all we have. This is all the home we have. Now, here's something that, there's something you mentioned earlier, and essentially that for all these efforts to mean something. Wangari Maathai said, this is my little thing, and I feel the echoes of what she said in what you said, and I believe as we go into the holidays, we should be able to figure out how to start a new year in a stronger position, one of knowledge, as you've said. Now, two final questions as we kind of try to wrap up. This one is a little easy. Tell me, this year, what are you most proud of?
Personally or? Okay.
Personally and then professionally.
All right.
Yes.
So personally, I think I'm proud of having been part of the solution, having been able to be a vessel to create awareness. Because like I said, one of the major gaps that we have is sometimes we know exactly what we need to do, but we've not been guided to do it right. So we do it forwardly, yeah?
Yes.
But being able to break down this message and say, this is how you think maybe climate change is a big concept, but this is how it affects you as a person on the ground. The farmer in Kirinyaga, in Kiambu, in Limuru, the herder back in Pokot. This is how, when drought strikes, this is the impact and it can be avoided. Or these are the measures that we can use to adapt and become resilient and thrive.
Right.
So being able to have been part of that, or a channel of is a point of pride for me.
Excellent.
And I hope to continue in the new year. So that won't be a new resolution.
No,
probably it's going to be a continuous resolution.
Brilliant.
And of course, for people like you and TV47 and other platforms that have been offered to provide this voice. Professionally, and this I won't take as an individual, but as a nation, is that we continue to spearhead as a country the transition and the swift transition to a circular economy.
Right.
We see even from the private sector, a lot of players now coming up and adopting one measure, two measures, whether they decide we are no longer going to print papers in our office, we're going digital, that reduces your footprint. And so when I tell stories through different documentations, whether it's in writing, I realize, imagine sometimes we sit and wonder, what efforts are we making? But when you see the little efforts that the different people are making, you realize we are moving in the right direction and the country is buying the vision. And so if we all buy and continue in the same spirit, before we know it to 2030, we are speaking a different story.
Absolutely. Final question. That's your camera right there. I want you to speak to the people. Give them a parting shot concerning what we're talking about tonight, or something that's in your heart to share, and wish them happy holidays when you're done. Please, that's your camera. Speak to them.
Number one, hydrate. We're going to the holidays, so make sure that you hydrate
with what?
Hydrate with water.
Yes, thank you very much.
Hydrate with water, but to again make sure that we don't litter. Carry your reusable bottle. When you go to parties and you have all these gifts and wrappers and cake, make sure that you tidy up after yourself. Take your small responsibility, because it will go a long way in making sure that we end the year as a sustainable economy. And on that note, allow me to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when that time comes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Josephine. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
You were brilliant tonight, and thank you for the best wishes.
Thank you.
And of course, hydrate with water. Hydrate with water. Up next is the great